More and more companies and banks in China cannot pay their million-dollar debts and interests. Are they too big to fall? A Chinese green card holder proudly believes China is ruining the U.S., even though he got his sociology doctor title after graduating from a U.S. college. A severe traffic accident in northern China. Over 40 vehicles collided, including a 34-ton methanol tanker. More than 10 cars caught on fire. Chinese state-run media paid U.S. media outlets millions to run pro-Beijing content. Some of them stopped running such inserts earlier this year. And 3 countries joined the U.S. initiative Clean Network, making the total number now exceed 50. The initiative is to purge Chinese companies from 5G networks across the world. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A number of Chinese state-owned companies are defaulting one after another. At the same time, the U.S. government is stepping up its efforts to cut off Chinese companies that do not meet U.S. audit requirements.
Corporate debt defaults are nothing new in China. But what is new in 2020 is that almost all of this year's corporate defaults came from high-profile entities, notably those that claim to be too big to fall. Chinese companies from industries like banking, high-tech, energy, and real estate reportedly defaulted in November. On November 13th, China's Baoshan Bank officially announced that its $980 million worth of Tier 2 capital debt was permanently canceled. The announcement was made after China's central bank officially liquidated Baoshan Bank's capital, confirming that the bank is severely insolvent and cannot survive. The cancellation also means investors will completely lose their investment funds. It's an unprecedented move in the history of China's commercial banks. But it's not just privately owned companies that are facing the financial troubles. China's state-owned enterprises are also involved. Yongchen Coal is a state-owned credit rating company. It too announced its $153 million bond default in recent weeks due to cash flow constraints. Now Yongchen Coal is fighting for a debt extension. The extension proposal must be approved by all investors before it can take effect. But investors have decided against allowing the extension. They say Yongchen maliciously failed to do their due diligence and pay the debts. That's because just before the default announcement, Yongchen transferred its core assets to 2 other entities, with no cost requirements and ahead of schedule. A private equity professional questioned why these state-owned enterprises were not treated in a market-oriented manner, and why they started emphasizing marketability only when it comes to paying back what they owe. The Yongchen debt crisis is a huge blow to China's financial situation. It, among other signals, seems to indicate the collapse of China's national credibility. In mid-November, China's central bank poured over $120 billion into medium-term lending facility operations. The move was expected to boost domestic bond market confidence. But on the same day, major Chinese tech company Tsinghua Unigroup defaulted on its private placement debt. That's after its request for extension was denied. Tsinghua Unigroup is surrounded by the Chinese regime's leadership and is controlled by Tsinghua University. It was even bold enough to claim that it had acquired Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company, the world's most valuable chip maker. Now it's defaulted on a mere $190 million debt. Real estate companies are also suffering. Fujian Fusheng Group was once given the title of real estate predator on China's rich list, but now it's unable to pay off $90 million in debt. Its default was announced on Thursday. Immediately after, the group's principal credit and related bond credit ratings immediately sunk from A+ to C. Bloomberg Businessweek recently summed up the situation in a comment, noting that if 2018 was the year China's private sector began to collapse, 2020 would be marked by a series of defaults among the country's state-owned companies.
And new information on the mortality rate of Wuhan's virus patients has come to light, once again bringing China's official death toll into question. This, according to a lead scientist in China. NTD's Don Ma has the story.
Thanks, Tiffany. On Friday, lead scientist Zhong Nanshan from China's National Health Commission revealed new figures about the virus spread in virus epicenter Wuhan. He said at the height of the pandemic, the mortality rate of severely ill patients in the city was 40%. The World Health Organization also released a similar statistic on the mortality rate for severe patients worldwide. Similar to Wuhan's data, it's listed about 50%. However, Zhong explained that the national mortality rate for severe patients across China is just 1.4 to 4.5%. that number would make up just 1/10 of the rate in Wuhan and the rest of the world. This raises the question, how can a virus have such dramatically different death rates, 40 to 50% in Wuhan and outside China versus 1 to 5% elsewhere inside China? It's not the first time questions about China's virus death toll have cropped up. Looking at the number of cremation urns that came out of Wuhan's funeral homes months ago, it's estimated that the city's real death toll is at least 10 times higher than that officially reported. At the height of the pandemic in March, families of those who died from the virus were allowed to collect relatives' remains from the crematoriums. Photos of long lines outside one Wuhan funeral home showed up on Chinese social media. According to Chinese financial magazine Caixin, trucks delivered about 5,000 cremation urns in just 2 days to just one of the city's funeral homes. There are 8 total in Wuhan. Despite those reports, however, authorities only reported over 2,000 deaths in the city at the time. In February, NTD's sister media, the Epoch Times, conducted an undercover investigation on the pandemic's true death toll in China. After calling several funeral homes in Wuhan, one of them confirmed that its crematorium was using 20 furnaces to cremate bodies 24 hours a day. The sudden rise in intake suggests that more people were dying of the CCP virus than officially reported. An employee at another funeral home told the Epoch Times that, at the time, they needed at least 100 body bags a day. In another case, a leaked document obtained by NTD in March shows that there were more than 20 times more cases than what the CCP officially reported. The document is a statistical summary of each district's cases received by the Wuhan Municipal Health Commission. It shows that on a particular day in March, 90 people tested positive, but publicly released data only reported 4. That's about 22 times less than the actual number.
Now we look to one Chinese green card holder named Li Yi. He says China is driving America to its death, something he says he's pleased about. But Yi got his doctorate degree in sociology from the University of Illinois, an American university, and still refers to himself as an American sociologist, according to his profile on Chinese messaging app Weibo. At the same time, Yi is a well-known member of China's 50-cent army, also called Wumao. It refers to a group of internet users paid by the regime to spread propaganda and promote Chinese Communist Party narratives on social media. Often called internet trolls, the group fights against what it sees as Beijing's enemies. The U.S. is one of its main targets. The unusual name comes from the fact that the regime used to pay 50 cents for each online post. That wage has been recently raised to 70 cents per post. But despite his status as a member of the 50-cent army, Li doesn't earn a living through his posts. Instead, he's published books and gives speeches as a career. During one speech last month in Shenzhen City, he said that in China, only 4,000 people died due to the CCP virus, adding that with a number so low, it's almost as if no one died. He then pointed to the audience and questioned why so many people were still wearing face masks. At that, he started laughing. The Chinese regime has been known to hugely underreport the pandemic's death rate in China. It's used its so-called low official figures to praise itself for its handling of the virus. But not everyone in China has bought into the claims. Many are still taking preventative safety measures. During the speech, Li added that the U.S. is going to die and that China will have driven it to its grave. Li Yi became famous in China because of his tough stance on Taiwan. He says Beijing should reunite with the democratic island to mainland China with the use of military force. Last year, he was deported from Taiwan during a visit there on a tourist visa. But it was later discovered that he intended to give a political speech there instead. Amid the deportation process, it was discovered that he also held a green card for the U.S. Audiences in Taiwan are getting a rare musical treat. The classic musical The Phantom of the Opera is being staged after cast and crew completed quarantine to enter the country.
Before arriving in Taiwan, the troupe performed in Korea back in March. But the show's global tour has been canceled in all other countries due to virus concerns. The show in Taipei employs nearly 130 staff members, uses 230 sets of costumes, and almost 170 wigs for the actors and actresses. The story tells the tale of a disfigured musical genius who lives beneath the Paris Opera House. He becomes obsessed with a beautiful soprano. Jonathan Roxmouth, the actor who plays Phantom, says the pandemic has brought new understanding to the title character.
We were going into quarantine and isolation a lot. So we all, in a way, became like the Phantom, locked away in a room, having to wear a mask, scared of going out into the world.
He added that he hopes people who watch the opera can now identify more with the character. The Phantom of the Opera premiered in London in 1986. Since it opened in New York 2 years later, it's become the longest-running show in Broadway's history. Actress Kaylee Ann Voorhees, who plays the story's female lead, says it will rise again.
I think when theater opens back up again, people are going to want that kind of homey, familiar feeling show. And for many people, that's Phantom.
Taiwan has been free of the CCP virus for over 200 days. With no reported cases, things are turning to normal on the island.
Now we look to a severe traffic accident in northern China Tuesday morning. A serious traffic accident was reported at 7 a.m. on the highway in Tongchuan City, Shanxi Province. Over 40 vehicles collided, including a 34-ton methanol tanker. More than 10 vehicles caught on fire. 3 hours later, the open flames had been extinguished. At least 3 deaths and 6 injuries have been reported. Prominent Hong Kong democracy campaigner Joshua Wong and 2 fellow activists pleaded guilty to charges related to last year's anti-government protests. Wong faces up to 5 years in jail.
Joshua Wong, Agnes Chow, and Ivan Lam appeared in court on Monday. After pleading guilty to charges of illegal assembly last year, they have been taken into custody. The assembly in question took place near the city's police headquarters in June last year. Wong was not a leading figure in last year's protest, but his activist career since the 2014 umbrella movement has drawn Beijing's anger. He faces up to 5 years in jail. Wong speak out over his situation before entering the court.
Perhaps the authorities wish me to stay in prison, but I'm persuaded that neither prison bars, nor election bans, nor any other arbitrary power will stop us from activism.
The activists' repeated arrests have drawn criticism from Western countries, saying China broke its promise to allow Hong Kong a high degree of autonomy after its handover from the UK in 1997. The latest move is the UK announced Monday it might pull its judges out of Hong Kong's highest court. The presence of foreign judges in Hong Kong is written in its basic law. It guarantees the city's freedoms under Chinese rule. Reporting by Grace Wang, NTD News.
Chinese state-run media China Daily paid U.S. media millions to run pro-Beijing content. That's according to disclosures filed by the Chinese outlet with the Department of Justice last week. According to the filing, China Daily paid the Los Angeles Times $340,000 for ads between May and October this year, $85,000 to the Wall Street Journal, and $100,000 to Foreign Policy magazine. China Daily also paid over $1 million in printing costs, including $110,000 to the Los Angeles Times, $92,000 to the Houston Chronicle, and $76,000 to the Boston Globe. The Foreign Agents Registration Act, or FARA, requires agents and outlets representing foreign governments to disclose their relationship with those establishments. They are also required to disclose information regarding related activities and finances in the U.S. According to the FARA filing, China Daily spent more than $4.4 million on ads, printing, and distribution over the past 6 months. China Daily has spent millions over the past few years running supplements called China Watch. It's propaganda disguised as news. These are inserted in major U.S. media outlets. Scholars said in a 2018 report, it's hard to tell these inserts are ads. China Daily has a history of spending millions to run these inserts in U.S. media. According to previous filings with the Justice Department, China Daily paid over $4.6 million to the Washington Post and nearly $6 million to the Wall Street Journal since November 2016. It also paid the New York Times $50,000 in 2018. The Washington Post and the New York Times stopped running such inserts earlier this year. The other outlets have not responded for a request for comment. 3 countries joined the Clean Network, making the total number exceed 50. The initiative from the U.S. is to purge Chinese technology companies from 5G networks across the world.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced over the weekend that Brazil, Ecuador, and the Dominican Republic joined the Clean Network. The Trump administration initiative is to safeguard citizens' privacy and companies' sensitive information from aggressive intrusions. On its official website, it says its goal is to counter the Chinese Communist Party. One of the most important means is to purge Chinese tech companies from 5G networks outside of China, such as Huawei. Pompeo tweeted that, quote, 53 clean countries, 180 clean telecommunications companies, and dozens of leading companies have joined the tide toward a trusted 5G network. He added they represent 2/3 of the world's GDP. The initiative was launched this April. It expanded later to include Clean Carrier, Clean Store, Clean Apps, Clean Cloud, and Clean Cable. Some of the largest telecom companies of the world have become, quote, clean telcos, such as Jio in India and O2 in the UK.
Venezuela and China established diplomatic relations in 1974. Starting from 2001, China has defined Venezuela as a strategic partner. The relationship between the two countries became increasingly important during the years of former CCP leader Hu Jintao, who said Chavez is an old friend of the Chinese people and has contributed tremendously to the relationship of the two countries, who referred to former Venezuelan President Chavez, a socialist enthusiast and somehow a big fan of China. His unique affection for China has made him a frequent guest for the Chinese media. Chavez never hesitated to praise China, as much as his verbal abuse to the U.S., such as the United States empire, is in its final hours. According to data from a Washington-based think tank, the International Center for Strategic Studies, China has provided $62 billion in loans to Venezuela since 2008. That accounts for 53% of China's total loans to the Latin American region. On top of the energy development and infrastructure constructions, China's arms sale to Venezuela also grew very fast. China's arms exports to Venezuela accounts for almost 88% of total arms exports in Latin America over the past decade. This has made China Venezuela's #1 arms supplier. Venezuela has reciprocated China's friendliness. In December 2004, it announced its recognition of China as an autonomous market economy. In 2017, the U.S. officially rejected China's claim for autonomous market economy status at the World Trade Organization. Chavez's successor, Maduro, also inherited this friendliness. In 2018, the two countries signed a memorandum to promoting the Belt and Road Initiative together. According to CCP's mouthpiece, Xinhua News Agency, earlier this year, Venezuelan Foreign Minister Arriaza visited China and spoke highly of Xi administration, saying Beijing is becoming a role model of multilateralism and the win-win model of international cooperation. This July, the Venezuelan government issued a communique in support of Xi Jinping's Hong Kong national security law. The document declares its opposition to any interference with China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. For over a decade, Venezuela has been the largest recipient of Chinese state-to-state lending in Latin America. Venezuela's descent into economic crisis and its deepening political unrest in recent years worried Beijing. This put into question Venezuela's capability of paying China's debt, especially with their dramatic drop in international oil prices. Even in crisis, the Chinese government has expressed support for Maduro. U.S. Vice President Mike Pence has said that the struggle in Venezuela is between dictatorship and democracy. Maduro is a dictator with no legitimate claim to power and must go. Beijing has stated that they are in close communication with all sides. Juan Guaido, a Venezuelan politician, told the South China Morning Post this February that the promises that the Venezuelan government would respect all the agreements signed with China. Some observers say this suggests China's main concerns are economic, not political. Matt Furchin, a specialist in China's political economic relations of Carnegie Tsinghua Center for Global Policy, believes the troubled China-Venezuelan relationship is a consequence of Beijing's misplaced assumptions on risks of massive loans for oil deals. And China still unwilling to admit those miscalculations or to learn from them. He also said Beijing refuses to acknowledge the role its loans and diplomatic support have played in the slow deterioration of Venezuela. And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.